I don't know about you, but as a developer, I've noticed SaaS seems to be everywhere. Whenever I open social media, whenever I watch YouTube, I'm always seeing someone talking about some sort of SaaS opportunity. Seems like that's the easy way. Passive income, easy to create apps these days. Almost anyone can now build a SaaS, but not everyone is making money off it. Let me explain, because I think it's important to establish between opportunities and viability, and that's what we need to do with SaaS. Firstly, it's the barrier to entry is almost non-existent. Require a laptop, an internet, and your idea, and that's it. And unlike other conventional business type, there is almost zero upfront costs. None. You don't need any inventory, any warehouse, or any physical product. So you don't need upfront capital, you don't need to go up to any investors. You literally have the whole thing on the internet, on your laptop. Next, we have running costs. And I kid you not, guys, I have an app right now called Codeless Sync, and to run it every single month cost me $5. And part of the reason why it costs so little is because I created almost everything up front from ground up. But typically, I would say for an average person who has an app, maybe 20 to 40 to be realistic. It depends how many services you are using. But $20 to $40 a month is almost next to nothing compared to all the other businesses types. And then I think this is a big one. This is a big one right here. No employees or teams needed to start. You don't have to answer to anyone. It's all on you. As a solopreneur, this is exactly what you want. You don't have to delegate any tasks. You can do everything on your own. Because now, in today's world, we have AI. AI can do everything for you now. And then you got recurring revenue. This is one of the most appealing part of the business, and almost no other business can match that when you combine it with global reach. I mean, when you put those numbers into your mind, it seems viable. There's no reason why you can't make a success story out of it. And then something else I think is important is scales without you. So regardless whether you have 5 users, 10 users, 100 users, if you built your app properly, your app, you can have as many users as you need and the workload is still the same. Unlike with other businesses where the more business customers you have, the more locations you might need to have, the more stocks you might need to buy, the more services you'll need to provide, the more time you'll need to give. With SaaS, it's not that way. It is the same workload. And then on top of that, the biggest ROI, which stands for return of investment. It's the same, maybe you can say it's the same as scales without you, but the workload is exactly the same, but the money just goes up and up and up just for doing the same work. Well, I suppose you might be wondering, well, this looks fantastic. Where do I sign up? But then the question is now is, why is almost nobody making money from SaaS? Because the reality is that almost nobody is making money from SaaS. So this is something I've noticed that is not spoken enough about, because you do hear a lot of success stories, but the cold reality is that most of them are not actually making money. And I keep asking myself, well, why is this the case? You know, what happened? The obvious answer, of course, is AI. I mean, let's not beat around the bushes here. AI has completely changed the game, but why has it changed the game? What was different about SaaS before AI and after AI? And in order to understand that, it's almost important to understand what it was like back then. Because you see, many of these founders, these gurus, I look at these guys and I think, good on you. But the advice that they tend to give doesn't seem to apply in today's world. We've all heard it. Build it and they will come. Yeah, I've heard that line. I'm sure you've heard that line somewhere. And I can tell you, it's just a very outdated advice. It's great advice back in those days, but why is it not great advice in today's days? And we need to go back. We need to go back to the time when there is no AI. And let's just imagine. So I created this little graph here because during this time, I never capitalized this time, but I know many developers who did. And there were three criterias, right? There were three main lines that I can see. Now there were more lines, of course, but we're going to keep this as simple as possible. And there were only two players. There were developers and non-developers. And the three lines that I really think is the main line is create an app, because there's no SaaS if you don't have an app. It's non-existent. And then the marketing. You can have a great app, but if no one knows about it, there's no money to be made. And if you can somehow cross these two lines, you're surely going to make some profit. How much profit depends on your SaaS. So I think we start with the developer. This is before AI. And back then, right, as a developer, I don't think most people knew about SaaS. Like, I knew SaaS existed, and I'm sure most do. It was either thinking as a 9-to-5 or freelance work. Those were the only two mindsets, and I don't know many others who had a different mindset than that. But let's just say you did have that mindset, and you were one of the few that were able to think that SaaS was a real opportunity. You were able then, at that time, to create an app. Now, creating an app is still no easy feat back then, because you literally had to create the app. But if you did manage to create the app as a developer, that line would not be as difficult. So you would get here. You would cross that create the app line. This was a tough barrier to cross for most people. Most people can't do it. But once you create an app, and it's a working app, you effectively only had to worry about marketing. Marketing was not going to be that hard because there were not many people that was able to create the first line. And because of that, marketing was much easier because there wasn't much competition to deal with. Customers had limited choice. They only had you and almost no competitions because the demand was high, but the competition was low. And because of that, profit was so much easier to attain. Whereas if you looked at it on a non-developer line, let's create that there and put that there. For a non-developer, which is everyone else basically, they had very little choice. Either one, learn how to code, but learning how to code back then takes time. And then to create a real good working app, I think on average, it would take about a year. So that line was not really achievable. So the only other opportunities or alternative options that non-developers had was to go out and reach out to a freelance worker. They managed to contact a freelance developer. They crossed that line. It takes time. And theoretically, because the non-developer only had to worry about getting the freelance developer to build their app, it leaves them space and time for them to focus on marketing. In retrospect, passing that marketing line was not difficult at all. You could say that making a profit was easy. Behind the scenes of an app, you now have to consider, as your app starts to scale upwards, things like API limits, how to upgrade customers, and the features that break down, because there will be a lot of breakdowns that will occur. You have to deal with customer service. You have to deal with heavy traffic and whether your server can actually handle that amount of people. Creating multiple servers to go with that. Create a bigger database. You might even have to restructure your database. Probably most likely you will have to. So you have to readjust the schema. So therefore, as a non-developer, you are constantly having to go back to the freelance developer that you hired to do your app. Because let's be honest here, as a freelance developer, the only thing you're thinking about is creating a working app as described by your customer, by your client. You're not thinking about handling all the edge cases that comes with it. You're not thinking about future breakage that could occur. You're just thinking about creating an app that is described by your customer. And how is your customer supposed to know about all these other issues that come along? They don't know. They're not a coder. You as a coder would know this. So because of this constant back and forth that the non-developer has to go back to the freelance, this profit line is a big problem to overcome, because they're having to pay the freelancers constantly for every time to fix the issue. So every time they go up, that's like another £500 being dumped in expenses to pay your freelancer. So this line was very difficult to cross for a non-developer. I would argue that maybe it's just down below the profit line. I think it's important to understand how big the market is as well, because that impacts everything. So I found this website here on Fortune Business Insight, and it's an interesting article. Now this part here, because I was looking at it, and you can see that the SaaS market size is continuously growing. I wonder if I can get this bigger. Yes. As you can see, we are in 2026, and the market is $375 billion. That is only set to grow to 1.4 trillion in 2034. SaaS is growing. The market is growing. So the money is there. Anyone that says SaaS is dead has got that one wrong. And even looking at the US market alone, which is right here, US alone in 2026 is 172 billion. And the rest is global. The world is a big player when it comes to SaaS. The question is that, you know, why is it so hard to make money out of? And we need to come back to this table right here. I mean, we're gonna have to change this now. After AI. So what has changed exactly? Well, the players are still the same players, but something has changed. Non-developers are no longer out the game. They are now Vibe developers. So AI has made creating an app very easy. They don't need to hire anybody anymore. Start with the developers. They create an app, no problem. But so is the Vibe coder. The Vibe coder can now cross this line without hiring anyone. And in many ways, I would say that Vibe coders will have an easier time crossing a marketing line. Developers will still cross that line. But here's the issue though. Because everyone is able to create an app now, that line is not really a barrier anymore. We could even lower this line down here, because the barrier to create an app is not even a big thing. But here's the issue. The gap from app to marketing has grown. Now we're dealing with more players in the game, more competition. Now marketing is the new barrier. You are now competing for the same customers, so there's more competition on the line. Before, it used to be about find an angle and then just find a particular niche for that market. But because there's so many players in the game now, almost every niche is covered, almost every angle is covered. And I think it's very obvious that AI has changed this. AI has completely turned the table and flipped the game. The traditional SaaS used to be just create the app and you'll get the customers coming. But now, creating an app is not the barrier. Create a viable marketing community is the barrier. And because the marketing line is so much higher, this now becomes questionable, because I don't think most developers are good at marketing. You can create a great app, but if no one knows about it, it doesn't mean anything. The thing is with Vibe coders is that there's still some issues with Vibe AI coding. Like, you need to really understand the infrastructure. So you're going to have some scaling issues. But again, it's not a huge barrier line, because if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to figure out at some point. But you're still going to hover at this line, just like the developer is hovering at this line. And I would argue that most SaaS builders are under this line right here, because almost no one's making a profit. Now, are there exceptions? Of course there are exceptions. The gurus are making exceptions. When we have to come back to this question here, why is it looks like everyone is succeeding? And the reality is that not everyone is succeeding, but it appears to. And I have no doubt in my mind that whenever you open social media or whenever you open up any some sort of app, you see everyone is winning. You hear headlines such as, I'm now making 10,000 every month in the space of 3 months. The reason mostly is because social media pushes winners out there, and it's called survivorship bias. And with good reason as well, because you can learn from winners, whereas with people who don't succeed, it's very hard. Like, you might want to know where they made the mistake. You're not going to exactly want to take advice from someone who's lost unless they turned it around and did become a winner. SaaS is still a viable business, but you have to go about it differently. And I was looking at this one article, and this particular paragraph was the most interesting. This is the key distinction. The market is growing, not shrinking, but legacy software economies are being diluted as intelligence, memory, and execution move outside static application and into adaptive systems that operate across tools. In other words, companies are paying less for software, they are paying less for licenses and more for outcomes. The shift explains both the sell-offs and the opportunity. When profit pools move faster than revenues disappears, public market reacts immediately. Private market follows later. Essentially what this is basically saying is that SaaS old model where you make an app is no longer viable. It is the agents of SaaS that succeeded. It's automation, where AI has come in and has generated automation. Whereas when you had one SaaS model, it does one task really well. But with automation, it could do 15 tasks in one SaaS. That's the difference. That is what's changing about the game. Not only is competition arrived, but AI agents glue them together. So you now require less subscription, less applications, and less tasks, because one agent can do almost multiple tasks in one go. So how to navigate the marketing barrier? I've come up with these ideas. It's going to be tough. It's not easy anymore. There are no free lunch anymore. First one is coming up with a unique ideas. Unique ideas are great. It would suggest that you are the only one, or maybe there's very few competitors, but it's also a massive risk. You have to ask yourself, if no one else has done this idea, is there a reason for that? Maybe because nobody wants this idea. Are you going to spend months building an app, or maybe however long, and then just to find that nobody wants it? It's a risk. This is where you need to validate your idea. The second one is complex apps. The more complex an app is, the more likely that there's not many players out there that can do what you do. It's easy to create a simple app. There's so many simple apps out there. The market is saturated with simple apps right now. But complex apps is a whole different ball game. Because firstly, nobody wants to create a complex app. It takes time. We want results fast. And it doesn't matter how good the vibe coder is, there are just some things that takes time to learn. And developers still have the upper hand here. And then we come to the rise of AI agents apps. This is a great one to come up with if you can come up with an automated app, because people pay for convenience now. The next one is build a brand. Building a brand is probably one of the most effective things you can do because people buy from people. I remember a time when I did sales. It was a tough learning curve. And one of the most distinctive things that I remembered was every time I made a sales, it was almost always because the customer trusted me. That rule applies to today, and that will never change. People buy from people that they like or they trust. And building a personal brand is one of the most effective ways of getting people to buy from you. However, you still need to build a solid app. And then you have the last and final one. This is what I think most SaaS builders are relying on heavily. And I don't think many of them are very good at it, to be honest. Because you really do have to market the hell out of your app. There's just no way around it. You know, you got so many competitors out there. You have to go with SEOs, maybe pay for ads, to go crazy with organic social media. Whatever it is, you're gonna have to go really hard area, because this is what most people are using. This is the main strategy for most people. The ideal situation is to try and use multiple, if not all of these ideas together. Okay, if you could hit at least a couple of these points, you're going to do a lot better than most people out there. But ideally, you want to hit all of them. And then finally, I think it's time to give the conclusion. And I was very dissatisfied with this conclusion, but I also think it's the honest and straightforward conclusion I could come up with. Mainly is go in with your eyes open, because social media is using survivorship bias, and you're going to see winners everywhere. It is what we say, hard. Nothing is easy. It was hard before, but I think it's on a whole different level of hard now. And the big point where everyone talks about marketing is your main focus. Building app is the easy part. Think about who your market audience will be and try to envision how you are going to reach those people. Because if you can nail that part, I guarantee you're going to be part of the 10% of people who build a SaaS and actually is a success story. It takes time, it takes effort. If you can do it, and you will be a great story that I would love to hear from. And I wish you guys the best of luck. I hope this wasn't negative, because I'm not trying to put anyone off it, but I also think that it's important to point out some hard truth when it comes to SaaS, to understand the reality of what SaaS building is in today's world. AI has changed the game, AI has flipped the table, but you can be a success story as long as you know what you're getting yourself into. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. Please like, subscribe and comment. Until next time, take care. Love you guys. Bye.